friends. Welcome to Muscle Maven Radio. I'm your host and internet friend, Ashleigh Van Houten. Thank you for being here with me. Before I even get into today's podcast guest, my little intro, I wanted to quickly read a podcast review because I've decided I used to do this and I kind of fell off. Just thanking people who are taking the time to leave a review, because that's why the podcast is still happening, is because you guys are willing to take the time and subscribe and share and like and rate and review. It's very important. And I wanted to read a review that I really liked, so that I can say thank you to this person and maybe send you a gift. So what I'd like to do, because today's sponsor is Bubs Naturals, they make awesome collagen and MCT products. You have the choice of winning either a signed copy of my book, It Takes Guts, or I can send you a little gift package from Bubs, whichever you like. But the review today is from Rick C57. So if you hear this, and it's you, I want you to send me an email. My email is in the show notes, and just let me know that you were the lovely reviewer, and I will send you a gift. So the review says, a favorite podcast always loaded with great information. I love how Ashleigh packs every episode with outstanding content that resonates with me. I always learn something new and appreciate how much effort Ashleigh invests in this podcast. I love the addition of amazing guests and how awesome she is at interviewing and finding those golden nuggets that make this podcast so special. Thanks. That is awesome. Thank you so much. Also, of course, I love doing this because it's an opportunity to kind of like brag without bragging, right? Because someone's saying something nice about me, I don't have to say it. Someone else said it. So thank you, Rick C57. I appreciate this review so much. It means a lot to me. Folks, please continue to leave your reviews. I know it's annoying when people ask, but it's all we got. It's all we got. So please do that. Moving on, today's guest is an awesome human being. I've interviewed him actually a bunch of times for every podcast I've done, which is now 3. I've actually hosted 3 podcasts, co-hosted 4. I'm lying. I'm all over the internet, guys. But anyway, I have interviewed Dr. Mike T. Nelson 3 separate times because he is so full of useful information and just a great person to chat with. He's a body composition and performance expert. And he spent over 18 years now learning how the human body works, focusing on how to properly condition to burn fat, become more strong and flexible and healthier. He has a PhD in exercise physiology, a BA in natural science, an MS in biomechanics. He's an adjunct professor and a member of the American College of Sports Medicine. So this guy knows what he's talking about. He also has a couple online courses and programs, including the Flex Diet certification that I am currently working my way through, because one of my goals in 2021 was to just do more education. Like 2020, I was writing that book. I was very, very engrossed in that. I wasn't doing as much learning as I normally do. And I think it's important that we're always constantly learning from new people, and just gathering more information to make our work, our lives, our own lifestyle better and healthier and more informed. So I finished the Precision Nutrition Level 1 certification over the holidays. I'm now working on Mike's course, which is amazing. The first module is all about protein. So obviously I'm into that. And I've got another one lined up with another guest who focuses all on women's physiology for training. And I'm super pumped about that one. So anyway, all that to say, my brain hurts, but I'm grateful for it. So in today's episode, I'm talking to Mike about metabolic flexibility, which of course is something I talk about a lot, but kind of more interestingly, we talk about physiologic flexibility. That's something that I don't think is talked about as much in the world of positive behavior change and coaching, but it's very important because it's one thing to say, here's how you make someone eat better than they used to, or change their workouts by giving them this information. But we don't often talk about the psychology of it and how willing, ready, and able a person may be mentally to make a change. Because it's easy to say, instead of eating that Twinkie, eat an apple. But if that was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? So there's obviously more complexity and layers to this than we want to give it credit, right? So we talk a lot about that and how we can approach that to help people create better behaviors in their life, including ourselves. I ask him about sort of this flexible diet thing that he talks about and intuitive eating, and whether he thinks that's really realistic in today's world where, I mean, we're just swimming in junk food, literally at sometimes. So we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about psychology. His programs and his approach is just, they're so pragmatic. They're so realistic. They're so based in reality, which I think is what we need more than ever these days. Things can look good on paper and they just don't work in the real world. And his approach is the opposite of that. It works. It makes sense. So I really appreciate Mike taking the time to chat today. I know this is a long intro, but I guess I got a lot to say today, guys. So I appreciate you being here and taking the time. And here's my interview with the awesome Dr. Mike T. Nelson.
All right, Mike, welcome back to the podcast. I think this is your third time on, so I thank you for continuing to come back and talk to me.
No, thank you so much for inviting me to come back. So I must not have screwed up the other ones too bad. So
no, I love chatting with you. And I think that the last time we spoke, we went down a rabbit hole about like learning about human physiology and health through like hibernating bears, which was kind of a cool tangent. So I'm going to link that in the show notes so people can listen to the other conversations we've had. Yeah. But I guess, I mean, first, you don't have to kind of give your whole sort of bio, because I think folks probably know who you are by and large right now. But if you could kind of just give us a little bit of background on what you do and like what you're kind of up to these days, that'd be great.
Yeah, so right now I'm associate professor at the Carrick Institute. So I'm helping teach their exercise human performance course. And then we did some online courses for them, one on neuro research, and then I'm just finishing up one on the effects of ketogenic diets for TBI, so traumatic brain injury. That'll be out hopefully in a couple of weeks, and doing some teaching for them, which is great. I teach for Rocky Mountain University, and then I have my own stuff with one-on-one M3 clients that I work with, doing all their nutrition and mobility and training and HRV and all that kind of stuff, which has been super fun. And then I have 2 certifications, the Flex Diet certification, and then also the Physiologic Flexibility certification. So the Flex Diet is more on nutrition and sleep, different interventions for, I guess you could say, recovery, body composition, performance. And then the Physiologic Flexibility cert is, I kind of want to say it's viewed as more fringy type stuff of biohacking, of breath work and cold and hot, and how do you put all those things into an actual physiologic framework? So like, how do you know when to use each one, which is a question that's been kind of bugging me for like 5 years. So cold water has a lot of very cool things, but if you're absolutely trying to maximize the last ounce of lean body hypertrophy, muscle mass, crawling into a chamber for, 10 minutes in cold water, probably not a good idea, So what are kind of the limits of what we know? How do those fit within an actual physiologic, I guess you'd say, taxonomy in terms of you as an organism? What should you be doing?
Okay, I am really interested in that actually, because although all of this biohacky fringe stuff is biohacky and fringe, it's also the stuff that people are like interested in and people want to focus on rather than the, key things, because it's sexier and it's interesting and it's fun and it's cool. But I really like that you're approaching this fringe stuff from a really practical standpoint. Like, if you're going to do it, here's how to do this in a way that makes sense and fits in with the rest of your life, because it can get very overwhelming. The people who like to listen to podcasts like this and like to research stuff like this, it's great to learn about coffee enemas or jumping in the ice or whatever it is. But when you don't really know what it means, how it really works, when you should be using it, when you shouldn't be using it. So I'm going to make a note that I want to chat actually about that.
Yeah, for sure.
That's really fascinating. How has your work, if at all, kind of changed in the past year with, what we're all going through?
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy compared to usual, which means it's been I'm 1 degree calmer than before, because I sat down and was at my buddy Dr. Ben House's place in Costa Rica when all the COVID stuff went really crazy, and we got out of there, luckily, long story, but we made it back. Got back home, and I'm like, oh wow, this is wild. We're stuck in our home for many weeks. Like my whole schedule, I'm sure, like yours, all presentations, seminars, conferences, everything I was doing just just within a week, just all disappeared entirely. So income, everything else that went with that. And so the good part is I've been teaching online for probably 5-6 years, and a lot of people looked around and went, oh, hey, who can do an online course for us? Like, hey, you get over here. We want you to do a course. So the good part was I had a lot of opportunities to do stuff. The downside was I knew that there's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 month delay by getting the course, getting it done, getting it out there by the time it gets marketed, because I usually get paid as a percentage of the course, which is fine. So some of the courses went well, some of them, not so good. As you know, like it was just super volatile from April, even through now. Like some people did really well, other people were not doing well. No one could figure out why. I think it was just a consumer thing, especially in fitness, where you have a lot of people that, hey, I was training people in the gym. Oops, my gym closed. I'm not training anyone right now. Ooh, I have a lot of time to do continuing ed, but I'm rightfully very scared that I may not have any income at all coming forward. I don't know when the gym's going to open again. So just a lot of volatility, which I don't know. It kind of, there wasn't only so much you can do about that.
Yeah.
But so the nice part is I have a garage gym, and I had the freezer for cold water immersion. I set up my bike in there. I got my rower. I've got the rack. So I'm like, oh, this is a good time. I'll just do an aerobic base training in the morning, lift in the afternoon. I ended up working more probably the last couple of months, several months I have, than probably the last maybe 4 years.
Wow.
But previous to that, I look back and I was like, for 3 years in a row up until that March point, the longest I was ever home for in a row, I think, was 3 weeks once. So definitely different than that. But it's been good, been able to get a lot of projects done. Clients have been pretty good. I mean, it's as you know too, like online stuff is, people look at it and they go, oh, that's just so easy. Why doesn't everyone train people online? I'm like, it's not really that easy when you're doing all their nutrition, their training and everything. And then you've got gyms that opens, gyms that close.
Yeah.
You're doing body weight training with them. Okay, what do you got for equipment? Okay, now you can go back to the gym. Ooh, great. Like I have some clients in the UK. Oh wait, now we're at like such a higher tier that everything has closed. So just the constant reworking of stuff, which is fine. I mean, I'm not complaining about doing it. It's just on top of all the other stuff that that you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I can echo a lot of this because I was probably busier than I've ever been in my life professionally the last year. And I do think there is like an element of like, look, this is the situation we're in. So are you going to just double down and adapt and figure some things out and try to maximize it? Or are you just going to, I don't know, give up, which I've done a little bit here and there too. Spent a couple of weeks giving up, but I always come back to it. But I think, one of the things, there are certain industries and certain, things that are never going to go out of style. Like people are always going to care about, even if it is a niche group, are always going to care about health and fitness. That's always going to be something that matters to a subset of people. And so I have found it actually like pretty busy. I mean, like you said, like motivation waxes and wanes, and people's sort of ability to invest in something, goes up and down throughout the year. But I think that a lot of people are really using this opportunity to kind of pare down, learn some things, get ready for what's going to come, because again, it may change. It may look completely different. The landscape might look different, but I think people are always going to want experts in nutrition and exercise and fitness and body composition and all of those things. Do you anticipate, like, are you thinking about in the next year, 2, 3 years, how that landscape's going to look different and how you're going to adjust as a result of it? Or are you kind of just still rolling with the punches as they come for, month to month?
Yeah. I mean, I think if anything, my prediction is for what I do, it's probably going to be better. Yeah. Because I think trainers now have just like, the industry has just been fast forwarded, I think probably 5 to 10 years, where I don't think anybody now can make an argument that, oh, I'm a trainer, I work in the gym, which is awesome. We need those people. It's great. However, I think every one of them, even if you're only an in-gym trainer, should have some online component. And doing nutrition work with your clients is the easiest thing to make online.
Mm-hmm.
So the argument I've had is that even if you see Betty, 3 days a week in the gym, you should have some online system that you're using to work with her on nutrition, because most of that's going to happen outside of the gym anyway. And is that going to be a little bit more time and effort on your part? Yeah, obviously charge for that as a service, but I just think that then it makes it an easier transition. If your gym's open, if your gym's closed, you have restrictions, whatever, clients are going to get a much better result, because especially most of them are there for body count changes, which we know nutrition is a huge component with that. So I think for what I do, selling, Flex Diet certification online nutrition system, probably helpful for that. And I do think that we saw initial flood of a bunch of people going, ooh, I'm going to make a bodyweight program online. We had just, in my biased opinion, May through August, everyone and their brother just tried to do online, and they either found out that, ooh, this is a lot harder. And it was just sometimes kind of a race to the bottom of who can put out just not the highest quality stuff for very little price. And and hopefully that's going away.
Yeah. And, or at least that just sort of people see through it, right? Because
exactly.
I mean, that's kind of always my hope, is just that like the cream rises to the top, and because there are always going to be people who are just going to put out a PDF for $9.99 that's total garbage. But hopefully people, the more education that's out there and the more discerning people can be, they can pick out the things that are actually going to help them. Are you having clients who, like, if you had maybe bodybuilding competitors or like big dude clients who are really trying to build, or even women build or try to grow muscle mass, did you have like an influx of clients who were like freaking out because they're like, I can't go to the gym, my muscles are going to disappear tomorrow, what do I do? And what do you do? Because I mean, for my experience, like I recognize again that I'm not like a muscle bound like heavyweight, but I am always focusing on at least muscle maintenance and usually muscle growth when I can. Like I want to have a good amount of muscle. And I learned in the first part of quarantine that your muscle doesn't disappear overnight if you are eating properly and taking care of yourself and doing the things you can do and exercising, efficiently and intelligently. But it's been a year now, and I am starting to notice some changes. I am starting to notice the effects of not being able to go to the gym and lift super heavy and maybe lift with the intensity and frequency that I normally do. And again, it's not massive, but I could imagine that if I was back in my competing days, I'd be a little bit worked up. So are you having that issue with some folks?
Yeah, hasn't been too bad. I only worked with like a handful of physique competitors, and the people I had at that point, one person who will remain nameless, she would sneak into gyms that she knew the owners and train at odd hours and stuff like that. So she kind of found a way around it, and she worked in a gym too. So I had a couple people that got kind of creative with that. I had other people where it was like, okay, maybe the gym will open in a while. Let's just do some body weight stuff. Let's get your joints feeling better. Let's get rid of all the standard aches and pains. And, we'll cut down on nutrition a little bit. You're not going to get fat. You don't have to worry about that. You're not going to lose all your muscle mass. And just making sure that once it opened again, they were at a position where they felt refreshed and, could make progress again. Some of the other competitors I have, I just said timelines, who knows? Like, just maybe now is a good time to focus on sort of an off season, type thing. If you wanted to add, some more lean body mass, and that was probably a perfect time, to do it. Maybe that wasn't your goal. So it's been a little tricky, but I agree that if you can get some loading's better than none. If this gets protracted out over several months, then I think, you're probably going to see a little bit of a difference that will, I think, come back quite fast. The thing that I just really try to get people not to do is to just like throw in the towel and be like, screw it, I'm just going to eat Cheetos and not do anything. Because that's definitely not going to work. And I've seen just a huge difference between, even doing some blood flow restriction, light training, That's not ideal or perfect or optimal, but that's probably enough to keep you pretty good. Like not the best, but pretty good. But if you do nothing at all, oh man, that that's like
Yeah.
another world altogether.
It is almost like a neurological thing too, because I had this similar experience where I have a pretty decent setup at my home gym, but I don't have a barbell. I don't have a ton of heavy dumbbells or weights. I have some, and once I kind of like got rid of the ego of like, I'm not lifting the heavy weights that I want to be lifting. I'm lifting whatever's here, and was just like, just do the best you can with what you have. Hello,
Yeah.
that's what life is. I did feel like I was able to kind of like you said, like focus more on maybe perfecting my form and really feeling the muscle tension and contraction and really, recovering properly and things like that. And I think just keeping those movements and keeping your muscle memory alive during those in-between times, I think, like you said, is probably going to help a lot when you get back in. And then of course, all these type A people want to get back in and go to their max weights again within a day because they're so excited to get back. That's been another thing because my gyms are very on and off. I'm up here in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And when I go back, it's like a conscious effort that I like get a squat rack and I'm like, I really just gotta do the bar for a couple sets. Like that's what I gotta do because I have not been doing this and I don't want to cripple myself. But yeah, it took a little bit of like ego dissolution, but once I did it, I'm like, this is preserving me. Like this is making it so that when I do get to come back full on, I'm going to be healthy. And like you said, I'm going to be, ready, and maybe my joints will feel better and I'll be recovered. And it will come back quicker than if, you give up. It's just human beings. We don't do well with that, like moderation in the middle stuff. We do well with going balls out or sitting on the couch eating Cheetos. So that's kind of, it's a struggle. It is a struggle. And now that we're again, like almost a year into it, I understand, because the first few months I was like, awesome, I'm home, I'm sleeping more, this is great. And then like, as the months roll on and we're looking at years, I'm like, I get why people give up. It's not the right answer, but I get why it happens because it's relentless.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's even a faster way to lose muscle above just limb immobilization. So when we look at studies like limb mobilization, you'll see just big drops in muscle really fast because you're not moving it. So I found this out years ago after completely dislocating my right shoulder playing broomball. And at a walk around like this, not moving my arm for 8 weeks. And like 3 weeks into it, you could play games with my triceps. It was like one of those old lady triceps that would just like flap in the wind and stuff. But if you cut the nerve to a muscle, it'll literally disappear like extremely fast. So there's other things you can do to try to reduce that. So I think like you're talking about like the neural thing, even just getting some movement to it, even if the load is light, I think that will probably be, I wouldn't say 100% protective, but probably more protective than what people realize.
Yeah.
And then the other part I've noticed too, especially from traveling and coming back, we went down to South Padre, Texas for a while, and the gym down there is it's on the second floor. So like you have to be super quiet and like slowly set down your weights.
Yeah.
And like doing a deadlift is super hard. They took the squat rack, there's only one, and they put like these pads underneath it. So to do like an actual squat, you have to stand on this like foam pad that moves around, which I think they did this just to make sure no one does anything heavy. So I came back from there and we just had light kettlebells. And I've done this enough now to know that like weights I could do before I left. And I come back 6 weeks later and I was still training, just feel just ungodly heavy. And I think most of that is just the neurologic adaptation where you have less inhibition per se, meaning that your body's like, hey, I haven't been under this load for like 6 weeks. It feels really heavy. So doing just even partial reps or isometrics or something where I have what's called wagon wheels, right? So I can do a deadlift from a 14-inch pick instead of a lower point. Just stuff like that, just to get my body used to that heavier load, super low volume, but trying to inch slowly up on that intensity. Because a lot of clients, like you said too, I spend most of my time trying to talk them out of this massive load spike, right? It's like, okay, you did some body weight stuff, you did some blood flow restriction for 4 weeks. Now your gym opened and yes, you're only doing 2 to 3 sets. What? That's crazy. I can do more than that. It's like, we know that like the one of the biggest things for injury risk is you look at Dr. Tim Gabbard's stuff, going from low volume to high volume in a very short period of time, especially when you're not trained for it. So a lot of times I spend just trying to talk people out of that. So come on, just give us a couple weeks. You don't need that huge amount of volume. You don't need that massive amount of stimulus. Just give your body time to get into it, and then you'll be okay. Trust me, it'll come back. So just trying to pull them off the edge a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like that's a big part of most coaches' jobs is keeping people on the ledge, not jumping off of it.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to say, like, one thing that I feel like I matured during this time as far as how I approach exercise is I've always been somebody who worked out a lot because I like it, because it feels like my therapy. It feels like my kind of time for myself. And I knew, like, theoretically that I didn't have to go to the gym 6 days a week to be fit or to even maintain what I had. I did it really because I wanted to. But when I was forced to not go to the gym 6 days a week, it really hit home that the gym is such a small, it's a great part, but it's such a really relatively small part of your overall health, even regarding body composition and strength, really. So just knowing, it took me too long probably, but just knowing that, like, and there is a difference between high level professional athletes and the sort of recreational athlete that I am, but knowing that I don't have to go to the gym for an hour a day, every single day, to look the way I do is a good lesson to learn, even if it had to be forced upon me, because I think that one of the differences between sort of an amateur mindset to being fit and a real next level professional one is the concept of, like, minimum effective dose. Like, we should be wanting to work as little as possible for the result we want, right? Not work as little as possible, period, but how effective and efficient can we be in a shortened period of time so we don't have to spend our entire life at the gym, thinking about the gym, what have you. So it was kind of a hard lesson for me to learn, but I'm glad I learned it, because when the gym does open back up again, I'm going 3 days a week. And then the rest of the time I'm doing stuff outside, or I'm doing maybe some kind of different workout at home that's less punishing or whatever. I think it's going to be better for me in the long run, especially, with injury and overall health. Right.
Yeah. I like clients to be able to moderate both ends of the spectrum. Like, if you've got the time and you've got a goal you want to hit, then great. Let's see how much volume you can do, and we'll push that into the spectrum. Consequently, do you have other strategies, especially if you get injured, where your life doesn't go to shit because you can't go to the gym? Can you do a Zen style meditation and sit and stare at a tree and exercise your demons that way without movement? Right? Because if you're only good with high levels of movement, that's great. I'm not going to tell you that those sessions are not important, because they are. But can you learn to maybe go for a run, go for a walk? Can you learn to kind of moderate that a little bit? And then, like you said, if your gym or whatever you're doing is just not available, can you still stay right about where you want to be in terms of body comp and strength and that type of thing without that huge amount of stimulus?
Yeah.
So we went down to South Padre, Texas in October, November. We drove down, we hung out there for 4 weeks, drove back. And the gym was okay there. It's a nice place. It works. But I only went like 2 to 3 days a week. I would get up in the morning, do a little run on the beach, and then I'd just go kiteboard. And, I would eat Pop-Tarts and drink beer after I was done kiteboarding. People are like, what? That's so crazy. How do you do that? That's insane. I'm like, my output is so high, it just doesn't matter. Like, one day I rode almost like over 50 miles just riding back and forth in this little bay for like 3 hours and 40 minutes. If I have that kind of output, it just doesn't matter. So I didn't get on a scale. I didn't log a single damn thing. Of course, you're eating more meals that have protein and you're eating generally nutritious food. And I came back and I was literally at the exact same weight that I left. But I have the advantage of knowing what to do. And I've done this before, and I've ran this experiment multiple times. So I know what I can get away with and what I can't. So I think it's worthwhile for people to think about, if you've got other situations that change, what are things you can do to, maybe not make to your goals per se, but just kind of even just stay even and do some other things, relax, take a breath, have fun.
What's your favorite Pop-Tart flavor?
I I actually still like the strawberry ones with the weird ceramic type frosting.
Yeah.
It's a little scary that it doesn't melt in the toaster, and they probably use it to coat like tiles in the space shuttle or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I actually have a little Pop-Tart shirt on that a client bought for me. So
This is so on brand. That one's my favorite too, strawberry, and I really like the classic chocolate that also has the ceramic frosting on it.
Yeah.
Pop-Tarts, man. It's just sometimes you just got to do things for morale, if for nothing else, you know?
Yeah, and it's, I started doing it years ago, kiteboarding, because I realized, you can get 80 grams of carbohydrates in something I could leave sit on the dashboard of the vehicle that don't melt. Like, they're indestructible.
100%. Is that a kiteboard behind you?
Yeah, it's a surfboard.
Okay, that's just a regular surfboard.
Yeah, so I have this weird thing where I'm like, I've always wanted to learn how to surf. I've only gone like real surfing twice, and it was just ungodly hard. So I'm like, so wait a minute. So I use a kite. So what if I can use a kite and then ride in waves? So I've done that on a smaller board. So now I'm in the process of trying to do it on the board behind me, which was super fun, but it's hard because you have to move your feet around all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So my goal was to make just one fugly transition, and to do a transition on a directional board, right? Because I'm only have the nose going one way. You eventually have to switch your feet from your right foot in front, your left foot in front, and back and forth. And on a board like that, when you lose power in the kite, it just becomes a little bit trickier. So I would fly off the board. I'd get hit with the board. I punched out of my own safety when I was in Oregon trying to do it, and all sorts of stuff. But the cool part is, if I figure it out, or when I figure it out, I can then use the kite to get into the waves and get off of the waves. So I can use the kite to make up for all my horrible foot mistakes with the board, because I have an external power source. And it allows me to not be as good with timing. So in essence, in my little brain, I can just get a lot more reps. And so eventually take less and less power off of the kite, and then eventually transition to, going without the kite.
Did you, when you were practicing any real actual surfing, did you do it in Costa Rica? Because I remember we chatted about this.
Yes, we did.
Because that's, I mean, it depends on where you are, but where we were when I was learning, it had to have been the most perfect place, because it was just flat and smooth like the beach was, and it was away from the tourist area, so it wasn't a million like newbies just biffing all over each other. There's nobody there, and the waves were just big enough that like you could try something without being terrified. Like I had the best possible experience, and it was just so soft. Like you fall and you're not worried about getting scraped to death by the coral or whatever. It was so beautiful. It's such a fun, cool, meditative experience. And I'm like a water person anyway, so I'm always interested in the stuff that you're doing. But I really talk about this a lot, and we'll talk about sort of some of this other stuff that you can do outside of the gym to work on body composition and stuff. But I talk a lot about sort of the concept of just like movement versus cardio. And I feel like so often with fitness and the way we communicate online, so much of it is semantics. It's just how you describe something or what you call something, and that can result in people either being completely turned off or misunderstanding you. There's a lot about language and how you communicate a message. And to me, I feel like making that switch between any movement is cardio, is you like getting your steps in or burning your calories, and you have to do it so that you can eat a certain way or so that you can look a certain way. And if you make that transition to what are the things I can do that just move my body that I enjoy, guess what? Like that's all cardio, but it's not miserable and sad. And there's so many things you can do. And like surfing is a great one, and skiing is another one. Of course, growing up in a cold place, and I was a downhill skier since I was 3. I mean, that's burning crazy calories, and you're busy having fun and shooting yourself down a mountain. You're not thinking about, how many calories you're burning. It's beautiful. So I think that finding more things like this that people really enjoy, instead of this thing you have to do every day to get your movement in, I think that's such a huge mental shift that's so important for people. Because again, if this is stuff we're going to be dedicated to doing for the rest of our lives, like let's try to make it fun and fulfilling, and maybe learn a skill at the same time,
Yeah, I mean, that's why in the Flex Diet Cert, I have a huge section on exercise versus recreation, right? So exercise, you have, sort of a plan, you've got a goal, you have an intention, you kind of log stuff, you track things. And yeah, you may do stuff that you don't really like because you've rated that this goal you want to achieve is the main thing. Or recreation is like, dude, just like go have fun, right? Like some clients I have, like, well, I was playing tennis, like how many calories did I burn and this and that? I'm like, just go have fun. Like just because I get really worried about people who are so hyper into fitness that they have no hobbies outside of fitness. It's like that. Like go learn to ride a skateboard, like go downhill skiing, learn to snowboard, go kiteboarding, like pick up surfing, like go play tennis, basketball. I don't care what it is. Ideally, the more complex learning that you would have to take place, I think it's going to be better. You've probably heard this story about the sea slug, right? So the sea slug spent all this time wandering through the ocean, and then it finds a rock and it gets stuck to the rock, and then it eats its own brain.
I did not hear that story.
Move again. Yeah,
I can relate to it, but no, I
doesn't have to
move.
And so I just think of like how many people are just becoming sea slugs, right? Like and walking, all the other movement, great. I love doing it. I think there's tons of benefit to it, but I think going outside your current comfort zone and learning a complex motor task, which could just be playing catch or playing frisbee, it doesn't need to be anything crazy. I just think we're finding more and more benefits of that. And obviously I'm biased because I kiteboard, but I just think about how many hours I've spent trying to learn, and even now just trying to learn how to do new things. And how many things your brain just has to coordinate at that moment, from moving your feet on the board or surfing, and the timing and the weight distribution, and you're in an environment that's constantly changing all the time. And you're kiteboarding, so now you've got the wind to worry about and the conditions and other people and the waves, and just the amount of processing your brain has to do just to figure that out, to me is just fascinating. And that it's kind of scary that some people don't want to ever go down that route. And like you said, at the end of the day, it's just fun.
Yeah. It's one of those like inertia things though, right? Where if people have been still, if they've been the slug on the rock for so long, even if it doesn't feel great, or if it's, you know, kind of miserable, it's still like a misery you're familiar with and you're comfortable with. But I mean, I know I'm going to always remember the day in Costa Rica that I was learning to surf. I'm not going to remember the hours that I spent in a basement gym on a treadmill trying to get fit for my bodybuilding competition. So I think there is something to be said for that. I completely agree. And I feel so strongly about how good it is for your brain and your mood and just your outlook on life to just always be learning things. And I think also the idea of, you know, a lot of people who are hard charging worker outers are also perfectionists and type A people who, in some cases, not all, don't feel comfortable being a beginner and being crappy at things. And I understand I like to be good at things too, but I also I'm kind of always doing something I'm good at and then doing something that I'm just learning. So it like balances the scale. So you don't want to feel like I'm a complete idiot all the time who can't do anything. But if you're like super comfortable and good at everything you do, that's boring too. So I think having that balance and just taking the step to do the thing and learn the thing shows you that it's not the end of the world to suck at something and not really know what you're doing. And it's a lot more fulfilling to go from nothing to being competent at something than to just be good at whatever you're doing all the time. It's just kind of boring, I think.
No. I mean, I'm a big fan of that, like kiteboarding, surfing, like stuff that intrinsically is just hard. Like, you know, those sports, even as someone is extremely athletic, like rarely does anyone just hop on a board and figure it out. Like there's a few freaks that happens, but like pretty much everybody just gets their ass kicked. You know, it's like a bunch of my friends who do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right? No matter how good you are when you start, you're just going to get your ass kicked. That's just what's going to happen. You know, and so the older I get, the more I'm attracted to those populations, just because I want to be around people who have that mindset. And even people like so Maynard of the band Tool, very successful, runs a freaking winery restaurant, is like a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. To me is like super interesting because he had to start again at the bottom just like everybody else, right? So I'm always fascinated by people who get to a very, very high level in whatever sport, discipline, business, whatever it is. Can they go to something else that they're just going to suck at? And can they stay with the process and get better at it? To me is always just fascinating.
I love that. I'd like to talk a little bit more about this flex diet cert. First question, is this for trainers or coaches and or just people who want to learn about, being healthier? Is it for a range of people?
Yeah, it's initially set up for trainers and coaches,
Okay.
but it's done in a way that like 60% of the people who've purchased so far are trainers and coaches, 40% are just fitness enthusiasts.
Okay.
So either one can definitely use it. And what I was trying to figure out was a system of teaching nutrition that's a little bit more on the physiology side, and the psychology, the change aspect is more baked into the system.
Okay.
So when I did it, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to have a number of interventions. One of the biggest problems I see is like, well, where do you start, right? Do I micromanage my sleep? Do I worry about micronutrition? Should I get protein? Oh, I heard protein's bad for my autophagy and all this stuff out there. So initially I said, okay, I'm just going to take these things and rate them on what is a physiologic intervention, right? To my logical brain, this makes sense. And then I realized I'm like, oh, I did this when I started working with clients 15 years ago. That was a disaster. Uh-oh. So I probably need some component of psychology in here. All right. So example I use is sleep. So sleep is super sexy now. We could have a great discussion about all the physiologic things that just go awry when you don't get enough sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So based on physiology, super important for body comp, performance, health, everything. The downside, if trainers and coaches are listening, just think back to the conversation you've had with your clients about sleep. I would much rather try to put my head through a wall, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to a sort of value judgment on their life. So we go through your whole day, you've got all this stuff to do. And so they're like, okay, so you're telling me the 2 hours I hang out and watch Netflix with my spouse, significant other at night, you're telling me not to do that and to shut up and go to bed. Kind of, yeah. It's like you're not probably going to win that argument, So the psychology component to change on sleep is very low. So like on a 1 to 10 scale, I put it at like a 1. It's like abysmal. Physiologic ability, probably a 9 or a 10. So I said, okay, I came up with something I called just coaching leverage. So it's the physiologic impact times the client's ability to change. So for sleep, if we give the physiologic impact, say a 10, ability to change is a 1, like your net leverage score is literally a 10.
Mm-hmm.
If we talk about protein, right? Protein, physiologic impact, probably a 9. Client's ability to change with just even a little bit of education. You're like, wait a minute, I want to lose weight and you're telling me to eat more of this thing. Yes. Okay, that sounds good, right? So probably a 9, right? So you're at a 81 compared to a 10. So I just took that criteria and applied it to just 8 different interventions. So that way, when you're a trainer or a coach or even a fitness enthusiast, you're starting on the things, you've kind of rigged the system in your favor already, right? You're not trying to major in something that, yeah, there's a lot of good reason you should sleep more, but that's a really hard habit to change. Yeah. Eating a little bit more protein, there's great books on it and how to eat all parts of the cow and everything, right? That's probably an easier place to start than with sleep.
Yeah, I like this because it's a very pragmatic approach, right? It's like we said sort of at the beginning of our chat, like there are these basic kind of tenets that if everybody could do, we would have a different planet than we currently have, but easier said than done. In the course, because just talking about nutrition specifically, because flex diet makes me feel like maybe there's an approach of, I don't know, personalized nutrition, flexible. Mm-hmm. I mean, you did talk about Pop-Tarts a minute ago. So what's kind of and you don't have to give away too many secrets, but what is sort of like the general gist of your nutrition approach?
Yeah, so the title is a mashup of metabolic flexibility plus flexible dieting, because when you work with clients, you realize that, okay, I actually get super nervous of a client who comes in who's like, all right, boss, just tell me exactly what to do. I'll do everything you tell me. It's like, even if that person's a hardcore competitor, unless they have a track history of doing that, even then that makes me nervous. Like, you want to track your broccoli in the off season? That sounds like a horrible idea, right? So even for someone who's a very high level competitor, it just makes me nervous because I've seen those people are either on or off. And when they're off, it's really off. So trying to get some moderation. How I describe it to clients is, imagine it's like a bowling alley, right? So most standard nutritional advice is, all right, I'm just going to educate you. We need to be perfect. We got to be spot on. It'd be like going to the bowling alley and no matter who the best instructor is, you're expecting that person to bowl like strike after strike after strike. It's not going to happen. It's not very realistic. So, but can we inflate these little bumpers on the side, right? So you've been in the bowling alley where they put the little bumpers in the gutter, and all I want you to do is just get the ball down to the end and just knock some pins down. All right. And my whole goal is to keep you in this lane and not 5 lanes, down on the other side or in the other city, right? Just hit some pins down, just make some progress. And so by using that kind of flexible approach, you're allowing clients to kind of weave, but within a set constrained system, right? So that was when I set it up, I'm like, okay, so how do I design a system that has constraints, has people to get them to their goal, right? Because if they're just, doing crazy shit all day, yeah, you're not going to get to your goal and they're going to be mad. But allow them to kind of waver a little bit on their own, because that's realistically how humans learn too. Yeah. It's like, can you weave on the road and not put the car in the ditch, right? And if you keep doing that, you'll probably get to your destination, even if you were kind of a little bit all over the lane. And then you'll learn in the process of how to do that. So when you're done, you're like, oh, cool. Okay. Yep. I kind of fell off the wagon. I know what to do now. I need to do this. I'm going to eat more protein. Maybe I'm going to do a fast and I'm going to go to bed earlier. Right. So you'll learn what kind of the top things are. And then within the system, I did a big picture, which gives you kind of the context. Like, here's the roadmap of where we're going. Here's metabolic flexibility. Here's flexible dieting. And then with each one of the interventions, I had a 1-hour technical. So everything you want to know about protein, from protein synthetic response, protein breakdown, leucine, etc. And then that's all condensed into 1 hour. And then after that, there's 5 action items related to protein. So if you're a trainer, we show you, okay, how to pick which one of those 5 actions for your client, what will be best. So it's a flexible approach, but I'm giving you 5 options that I've kind of used that I know will probably work. So it's, how do you give context? How do you make sure that the technical part is actually correct? And then how do you give people specific things to do, all within a flexible framework, so they can get to the result they want, and they can weave a little bit and learn as they go.
Yeah, this seems like a really practical approach to getting healthier. Like, it seems like a very much like based in reality, which I think is what a lot of the, ideal get your perfect body in a month or whatever is missing, is the fact that it's not taking into account how human beings learn and change their behavior and make a behavior sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Do you think, though, like, maybe I'm going to sound a little pessimistic here, and I'm sort of in the middle of this, so maybe I shouldn't say it, but do you think that it really is possible for the average person to, and I know you didn't say this, but intuitive eating, right? Like, getting to a point where you understand flexibility, you understand that consistency is better than perfection, and being able to do this in a way that is just like balanced and not influenced by guilt and the outside world. And because, again, just knowing the environment that we're all in, where we can have all the information, we have all the details, and we know everything we're supposed to do and not supposed to do, and we still get sucked into traps of just giving up entirely or falling off the wagon in a crazy way, or orthorexia on the other side, and all of these things. Like, do you think it is a practical, realistic idea for most people to be able to eventually get to a point where they can, like, really do this intuitively?
I would say yes. The caveat is the amount of external oversight you may need at the end is going to be different for everyone. Okay. And then I think one of the keys to that is both environment in a short sense, and then how do we make you more adaptable to the environment you're actually going to be in, right? So if you're at home, especially now, yeah, you're trying to lose weight, you probably shouldn't eat 7 cookies a day. So buying a 24-pack of cookies and setting them on your counter, that's probably a bad idea. I've run this experiment multiple times. I can tell you the cookies magically disappear, right? So controlling your own environment, is that a huge win? Yes. The caveat where I think people go wrong then is they're like, but that's what you got to do with the rest of your life. You just got to be more hardcore, and you got to bring your food everywhere you go. And it's like, most people don't want to live that life. And I get it. If you're an extreme competitor, you're professional, that may be what you need to do for a period of time. I get it. But most people never think of, like, well, how do I make your physiology more adaptable to the cookies? Because you're probably going to run into carbohydrates. if your blood glucose goes to like 160 every time you eat half a Pop-Tart, I would say you're probably not that adaptable to the environment you're going to be, quote, released back into. So can we do both at the same time so that, you know, when you're out at friends, you have a bigger dinner, your health values, everything is fine, and you get back on track and you're doing what you need to the next day. The thing that's different, though, is some people may always need some bit of oversight. Maybe they only need to log their protein. Maybe they have a coach they check in with once a week. Maybe they just do a daily body weight. There's probably something they may need to do, but that should be the minimal, not the maximal. All right. So for myself, for quite a while, like getting on the scale each day is what I do at home. That's pretty good to keep me in line for most of the time. However, like I said, I'll go for periods of time of 6 weeks where I won't even get on a scale. Right. So now if I remove that external constraint and that feedback, that input, can I still kind of stay where I need to stay? Right. And the end goal, I would say, is the minimal amount of oversight. However, you know, that's probably going to be a little bit different for other people, but it should be the minimal, not the maximal.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. How is the course like laid out online? Is it like modules and you take like a test at the end, or how does it work?
Yeah. So there's 8 modules overall. Each one has a big picture, a technical, and then 5 action items. Then we also have expert interviews. So for protein, we've got like your Canadian friend, Dr. Stu Phillips, Jose Antonio, flexible dieting, Dr. Eric Helms, sleep and other things, Dr. Dan Party. Cool. So a bunch of other expert interviews in it, Mike Ormsby, Stephen Guillenet. So awesome. People, if they want to go further into like talking to Stephen about appetite regulation, like in terms of the neurohormonal mechanisms, he's way better on that than I am by far. So we have those hour interviews too. And then each one is based on an intervention. So the first one is protein. The second one is fasting. And then it just goes through all 8. There's a little quiz after each one. If people want to be certified, they have to pass each one of the quizzes. Total material, it's about 30 hours. So it's pretty in-depth. And I lost count of how many actual references there are in the course, but like 350 some or something like that.
So you can really nerd out on it if you want to.
Yeah. So if you want to go crazy, like I have all the references, like all the expert interviews, like you can, you know, at least have a head start of, okay, here's the references you should probably look at. And those are ones I've actually just reduced down. I mean, I'm not putting every reference known to man about protein and exercise in there because that could be hundreds and hundreds, but you know, so yeah, trying to condense it down into something useful.
Cool. And would you say, because, you know, I asked if it's just for coaches or sort of regulars, and you said, you know, it's kind of for everybody, but is there any kind of minimum level of sort of understanding or experience or whatever that you'd want to kind of have before you get into this course?
Yeah, I did it at a intermediate-ish level.
Okay.
Right. So what I did is one of my pet peeves is people using made up terms. And so I will use some of those terms, but I'll still use the technical terms, and then I'll define it and explain what it is. Right. So yes, we're going to talk about muscle protein synthesis and what that actually is. No, I'm not going to spend 3 hours talking about different tracer methods you're using to actually measure it and the different things of that. But I view it as trying to bring people up to a certain level instead of talking down to them. And the beautiful part is that it's because it's online. I've had a few people who are, you know, relatively new to the fitness industry. They're like, yeah, I kind of had to watch that one module like 3 times. I'm like, but that's fine. You know, like you can go through them as many times as you want. You're at home. No one's going to know how many times you watch the modules. Newsflash, I don't track people and go, ooh, Bob watched that one 4 times. You know, it's like, no one really cares. So it's a intermediate level. Like if you probably know what macronutrients are and have some basics, but my argument is that the less information you have, I think it's actually easier long term. Will it be a little bit more difficult for you to get through everything? Yes, but you just have that much less to unlearn. Yeah. Like I spend more time answering questions because people can email me directly who are in the course, getting them to try to drop things that are probably not true than I do trying to explain things they didn't understand.
Yeah.
And so if you're newer, by definition, you have less to unlearn. So yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit more work up front, but I think it's actually faster.
Okay. What's your least favorite made up health and fitness term that you see people using?
Oh God. I think right now, just because it's more top of mind, because I just did for the physiologic flexibility thing on cold water. So like cold thermogenesis, the term just irks the shit out of me right now. And that's just my own being triggered by it. Because is it kind of a real thing? Yes. But if I put cold thermogenesis into PubMed, you know how many results I get? 0. Right. So it's like, okay, maybe we should use words that are actually mean something instead of a made up term. And it's not, yeah. And it's hard because is there some truth to the definition? Kind of. Does it matter a whole lot? The amount of cold you need to expose to see body comp changes is an amount no one's probably going to do, right? Sitting in a room for 2 to 3 hours at like 50 degrees Fahrenheit and just a t-shirt and shorts, right? Or putting someone in cold water immersion for 55 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour. Oof. You know, and that was because they were shivering. So we don't even know if that's from the temperature or the fact that they're shivering, which is muscle work.
Right.
So yeah, that's one that's bugging me right now.
Okay, good. I like it. I like people's pet peeves. And that actually, this is good. This brings us to the last kind of thing we'll chat about here, which is your physiologic flexibility course, because I'm interested in it. And talking about this cold stuff specifically, it's a good segue because that's sort of one of the areas I've done some like sitting in ice baths and things like that. But I like live this all the time. Like I live in one of the coldest. I live in one of the coldest parts of Canada. So like my winter is just my entire life. That's probably what keeps me from gaining weight in the winter is that I'm constantly cold and shivering. So I try to look on the bright side. But again, for me, it's like picking and choosing the hacks that I want to do, they're going to add to my life, that are going to move the needle and not just do a thing because somebody on the internet told me to sit in a cold bath. And for me personally, for 6 months of the year, I'm taking a hot shower. I don't care. Like, I don't care if I'm going to live an hour long or like a year longer because I take cold showers for 5 minutes at the end. No, thank you. It's minus 15 here. Like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for me. So anyway, that's one that I've kind of knocked off my list, but talk to us a little bit about this course. And is this something that people would take maybe after they've taken the Flex Diet one, or people can just go straight into this one if they're interested in all this kind of weird fringe stuff?
Yeah. So I set it up where you can take the Flex Diet cert first, but it's not a requirement. So they're independent of each other. They're just looking at different leverage points, right? So if you're eating like an asshole, probably learning about nutrition is going to help. Like all the biohacks in the world are not going to save you. However, if you're pretty good with exercise and pretty good with nutrition, I think there is some very interesting adaptations that happen. So when I looked at physiologic flexibility, I'm like, okay, so we have metabolic flexibility. How well do you use fats? How well do you use carbohydrates? What if we take that concept and we scale it up to you as an organism, right? So the next question I had is, well, how do I know what systems to even bother targeting? Right? There's bazillions of systems in the body, and everybody claims that this system is the main one you need to look at. Like, okay, well, what about systems where your body has to maintain them within a fine scale area or you die, right? Because I think your body is just really wired for survival. And those things turn out to be homeostatic regulators, right? So the big one people are familiar with is temperature. Your body has to maintain about 98.6. It's actually not the right number, but it's close enough. And if we deviate anything, core body temp, a little bit too high or a little bit too low, then really, really bad stuff happens. However, because we're adaptable, we can put someone like you in Canada and they can still survive. We could put you in a sauna. You'll still be okay. We can sweat. We have these other adaptive mechanisms that actually allow us to go into pretty extreme environments, especially if you add technology into that. So another one is pH, right? Very, very fine scale that your body can move off of pH. However, we can ingest things that are kind of acidic. We could put you on the rower, have you do repeated wind gates. That'll create a lot of lactate plus hydrogen ions. Hydrogen ions are actually literally an acid that gets dumped into the muscle, and your body has ways of buffering that. Now, the last two are probably blood glucose, right? So back to the Pop-Tarts. You can go for maybe 24 hours with not even eating any food and still be okay. You could have 2 Pop-Tarts and hopefully keep your blood glucose within a normal range. And then the last one is oxygen and carbon dioxide, right? So those two are very highly matched. We have to get oxygen. We have to offload carbon dioxide. So once I figured out those are probably the main 4, I mean, you can get into a whole bunch of subcategories of each one of those. So if we train them in an intelligent manner, my hypothesis is that'll just make you a much better, more resilient organism. Unfortunately, the experiment we're running now is like those things are just completely disappearing from our life.
Yeah.
Right. Very few people get exposed to cold. Very few people get exposed to hot. Very few people do high intensity exercise. Most people don't do a lot of breath work, right? Light exposure, go down the list, right? So we know that we're running the experiment of removing these things from people's lives. I would say they're probably not getting better. So I think adding a small amount back in will have beneficial effects. And the cool part is if you're not adapted to it, you don't need that much, right? So if you're not adapted to ever really getting cold, I would argue that 30 to 60 seconds of cold water immersion will probably provide you some benefit. If nothing else, on the psychological side, to see if you can handle a stressor and not lose your shit. Which is fascinating. When I looked at that, I think it's like 20% of people die within a few minutes of cold water exposure from drowning. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. No matter how cold water you get dumped into, you're not getting, frank hypothermia within a couple minutes. But the water would hit their face and they would panic and they would go face down and they would literally inhale water into their lungs and drown because they couldn't control their state. It was probably a new thing. They never had any exposure to it, that type of stuff. So to me, it was very interesting looking at all the different research in that area. And the last thing, what I found was that most of the stuff that's promoted online as the benefits were probably not really a benefit, right? So sauna, right? People say, oh, we get massive spikes in growth hormone from being in the sauna. That's actually true, right? You can get a 1,700% increase in growth hormone. Does that mean anything in terms of physiologically moving the dial? Probably not, right? So
why not?
Acute changes in hormones due to big stimuluses like that just don't seem to add up.
Okay.
So you can look at some studies from Dr. David West, who is in Stu Phillips' lab out of McMaster. So they did this super cool study, 5 or 6 years ago now, where they're like, hey, we look at Kramer's lab and we see all this stuff where if you squat, we see increases in testosterone, growth hormone, all these anabolic hormones. So the assumption was, well, that's part of the response of why you get better from exercise. So what they did is they said, okay, all you young people come into our lab. So we're going to have you do squats, and then you're going to exercise only your right bicep. And we're going to measure and see, yep, we see testosterone go up. We see growth hormone go up. And then that right arm gets exercised under this high hormone condition. Take a day off, come back to the lab again. Now you're going to exercise your left bicep first, and then you're going to squat. So the left bicep is being exercised under a low hormone condition, but it's matched perfectly per individual, per load, per everything else. What they found was at the end of the study, no difference in size between your right bicep and your left bicep. So do those hormones happen? Yes. Maybe they relate to other things? Maybe, but they're just so short-lived that they just don't really seem to add up to it. Again, that's even still debatable. You get into, Kramer argues that it's, androgen receptor content and is bound to the receptor and you can't test it. Either way, in the study that they've replicated a couple times now, we didn't see a massive difference with it.
Interesting. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, once again, I think that this course is interesting and cool from a pragmatic perspective, like making people more resilient rather than telling people if you sit in an ice bath, you're going to live 200 years longer or whatever, because you're right. I mean, we go out of our way to be as comfortable as possible all the time. That's a very basic kind of human behavior that we can't really blame people for because it is so ingrained in us to try to avoid conflict and drama and pain and all of those things. But I think that just sort of understanding the importance of it and looking at it like it's a fun experiment, a journey, a thing that you can learn about yourself while you're doing, I think is kind of cool. Does this course have built in like all of these different components, like things for you to try? So it's like, all right, we're on the breathwork part now. Let's, try XYZ and see what that does to you personally.
Yeah. So what I set it up was a similar framework. So there's a big picture that kind of evolves of what is physiologic flexibility? What are, hormetic regulators? How do you make the body more robust to handle different environments? And then there's the 4 areas, and each of those 4 areas have 2 parts, right? So temperature, you're going to have hot versus cold. pH, you're going to have high versus low. And then each one of those has 5 specific action items, right? So for cold, here's a progression then of where you probably should start, right? Maybe taking a cold shower and then get maybe into, cold water immersion. If you want to do that, here's where to start. And then maybe get contrast therapy, that kind of stuff. Because I see people want to start with the thing that is the most sexy, but it's super hard to troubleshoot that, right? So if you do 5 rounds of contrast therapy between a sauna and cold water immersion, the amount of variables in there are just crazy. So if it tanks you for 2 days, because these are all stressors too, right? You can definitely overdo them, and you can see HRV changes, you can see performance change, acutely actually go negative. So each one of those has that. And then the other part I realized as doing the course, I think there's something that nobody talks about, which is called the cross adaptation effect. And it's been very little studied. So for example, they did cold water immersion, and then they tested people in their response to hypoxia, right? So low oxygen levels. What they found was that if you had one exposure to cold water immersion, you were much able to handle hypoxia much better than those who did not. So something that has nothing on the surface level to look like a low oxygen condition, we're putting you in cold water, appears to have this cross adaptation effect to other systems in the body that makes you more resilient at other stressors. So my hypothesis is that if we're targeting these 4 homeostatic regulators, you're probably seeing a lot of other benefits that we just don't really understand yet. And your thing too about at the root level of the entire course, my whole goal, which is kind of sneaky, I'll tell people what it is now. I want to train their prefrontal cortex to override their limbic system. So in English, it means the newer thinky part of our brain. Can we as humans use that to override our lizard brain? Right? Because your lizard brain says, hey, should I get in cold water? No, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard of in my life. This is a horrible idea. You should never do this. Ooh, but there's some of these other benefits. Maybe I'll get it. Can I have enough rationale, whatever I need, to overcome that little voice in my head to do the harder things in a controlled fashion? Because you're wired for efficiency. Right. So the fact that you could run to a gas station and eat 3 Pop-Tarts for like $1.27, that's actually wired. That's efficiency. I got a lot of calories. I didn't have to expend a lot of effort, and it was cheap. Great. I'm going to do this all day. Unfortunately, I think the only way out of some of the mess we have now is to use that new part of the brain to consciously go, okay, maybe doing that every day isn't a good idea. Right. Yes. Can I build up the skill set of, can I get in cold water for 30 seconds every day, or turn my shower to cold, use that new part of my brain to say, nope, this is what I'm doing. I'm overriding this other part. I know I'm going to be safe. I'm not going to injure myself. And I think that's going to translate to, over time, subconsciously, or at least as best we can, taking the stairs, doing other things that we know are beneficial, but acutely we're wired to not want to do those things.
I love that. I love that sneaky goal, because you see it reflected in other, like Stephan Guyenet, who you mentioned, yes. Hungry Brain, fantastic book.
Oh yeah, wonderful book.
Yeah, he talks about how your brain works and why that's fantastic and why it's kept us alive all of these millennia, but how we can work against it to improve our lives now in this weird modern world that we're in. And, you read like Cal Newport's books about digital minimalism, and it's the same thing. It's like, you're not crazy because of how you react to social media. Social media is designed to make you act that way. Here's how you can override it. And, having zero scientific evidence for this, but echoing what you're saying, of course it makes sense, even if we can't explain it, or if I personally can't explain it from a physiological perspective, it makes sense that the more resilient you are in one area is going to translate into other areas of your life, because you can look at that even emotionally or experientially, or, with metabolic flexibility and the way you eat, that the more, if you're a healthier person and you have metabolic flexibility, that can have benefits on your immune system, your immunity, and like all of these things are connected. So being able to, use the prefrontal cortex and be able to kind of think your way through things and do things differently, I think. And that gets easier. The more you do it, it has a cascade effect to the rest of your life. So I think that makes a ton of sense. And now I kind of want to take these courses. So maybe that's going to be like a 2021 goal for me. I did the precision nutrition course
Awesome.
last year.
Cool. I love their course.
It's fantastic. Such a cool, just such a really well-rounded course. So I really enjoyed that. But I think that's, going back to that always learning sort of perspective, that's what I want to do, is constantly be teaching myself and learning from smart people. So maybe I'll get Flex Diet certified this year. We'll see.
Yeah. And when I designed it, because people are like, oh, well, should I take this or take precision nutrition? I'm like, just take both.
Yeah.
Right. If you really want to understand habit change and smaller changes and that kind of stuff, I would say precision nutrition is probably a better choice. I don't make any money from it. I actually was one of the peer reviewers for the last version that they have.
Oh, cool.
If you want something that's a little bit more on the physiology side, but has the psychology more baked into a system that's a little bit more straightforward, and you like a little bit more structure, then I'd say the Flex Diet Cert is probably a little bit better fit for you. But, they're both, obviously I'm biased, but, I don't, everyone's like, well, I should do this or that. It's like, hey, just do both.
Yeah. I am at this point in my life a bit more interested in the physiology part of it, because I don't know, maybe it's having two psychologist parents or something, but I'm just like, I don't want to know any more about how the brain works. I just want to know how the body works. I'm more interested in that. So anyway, all right. Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time. It's awesome to chat with you as always.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been great. Do you have any more kiteboarding or fun trips on the horizon that I can feel jealous about?
A little bit. We'll be going to Costa Rica the end of January with some friends of ours who run the Special Forces experience in Canada. So we're doing kind of a sort of a working meeting there for a little while, and we're going to stay for a few extra days. And the place we're going to, it looks like actually has kiteboarding there, which there's only really like one kind of area in Costa Rica that has kiteboarding. So I'm going to bring my gear and hopefully get some rides when we're down there.
Cool.
But that's the only other, it's like really the only other thing we have coming up. We'll probably go down to South Padre again, Texas in April. And I haven't really tried scheduling anything for 2021, to be honest. I'm just kind of, whatever happens will happen, I guess, at this point. At this point.
I'm with you. I mean, I have dual citizenship, so I can travel, but the way Canada works right now is that you have to quarantine for 2 weeks coming back from anywhere. And I've already done it a couple times in the last few months. And one miserable exercise in resilience is quarantining in your house for 2 weeks. So I'm trying to minimize that. The trip has to be really worth it for me to do it. So we'll see. But but maybe next time we chat, next time I have you on, you can tell me, you can try some organ meat recipes and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that, because I have some liver in the freezer that we bought from a grass-fed cow a couple of years ago. And this time when we got our other cow, I was like, God, I don't know what to do with it. I didn't have your book yet. So I'm like, just put it in the hamburger and then we'll figure it out next time. So,
I mean, that's not the worst option, really. Hiding it in hamburger isn't the worst idea. But. All right, Mike, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Dr. Mike T. Nelson for taking the time today. Thank you to our show sponsor, Bubs Naturals. They are the best. I use their collagen and MCT every single day. They give great discounts. They gave me a 20% discount to pass along to you, which is higher than most companies. If you use the code MM20, you can get 20% off whatever you buy there. They also give 10% of their earnings to charity, which is another unheard of high number, because they actually started their company based around philanthropy. And then they just decided, okay, our products are great and let's make some money too. So that's the kind of company I can get behind. Love the guys at Bubs. Go check them out. Buy some collagen and MCT. Treat yourself. Also, just wanted to throw something in here. If you are still listening to the, 5% of people who actually listen to the end of a podcast, because this episode was all about behavior change in order to improve your health and your life, that kind of segues into another project that I have ongoing that I'm hoping to launch at the end of this month, the end of February, beginning of March, which is going to be an online coaching platform that is really based on behavior change. Because one of the things that I've found in my work doing one-on-one coaching is that 99% of the time, the people who come to me are not complete beginners. They're people who know the answers. And to be honest, all of us kind of know the answers. We know what we generally shouldn't be eating, what we generally should be eating. We know that we should generally be moving and sleeping better, all of these things, right? It's the enacting the behavior. That's the sticking point. And often we just need accountability. We need a resource. We need someone to just be there, be on our side, reminding us, holding us accountable. And that's so much of what coaching is. Now, look, if we're talking about like high level, like you're a big time athlete and you're training for a competition or whatever, that's different. I'm talking about the vast majority of people who just need a little bit of help and resources and accountability to do the things they already know they need and want to do, but just to get it there so that it's a lifestyle and it's sustainable. And so that's what I've been working on to help. So it would be an online coaching platform that you're going to have access to me. You can ask specific questions. I'm going to have a ton of resources, but really the way it's created online is to support behavior change rather than, for example, you got to talk to me once a week. I'm looking at what you're eating, like the kind of typical coaching thing, which I'm a little bit over at this point. So anyway, there's going to be more information coming out about that. If it's something that's interesting to you, feel free to send me an email. I can add you to the list of sort of VIPs who are going to know about it as soon as it comes out, and I can send you more information as it becomes available. But I just wanted to put that bug in your ear because I do think that is something that's, like I was talking about with Mike earlier in the show, it's something that's kind of missing from the coaching equation. So that's it. Thank you for listening to the very end. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you here next week.